Thank you for being a Torah facilitator. The Torah portion we're looking at is Vayeitzei. It is in our Hevruta booklet. It's on pages 22 through 24. And it's a really interesting Torah portion. Remember, we're going to read through the material. You're going to pick two or three gems that really speak to you. Make a list of a couple of questions based on each gem that will be springboards for conversation, and maybe think of a personal story or two. So in this Torah portion, Jacob leaves his hometown and he takes a rock as a pillow. Already kind of interesting. Pillows shouldn't be made out of rocks. So what does it mean that Jacob has a rock as a pillow? That's a really tough way to sleep. You could even just talk about sleeping patterns with these kids. There's a wonderful gem of Torah that talks about, it's really cute, talks about these rocks and how all of the rocks argued because each one wanted to be the one picked to be Jacob's pillow, and that God solved this problem by uniting all the rocks together into one giant rock. But even so, the rocks might have quarreled because Jacob's head could only fit on one part of the combined rocks. And so why didn't they quarrel? And the rabbis say that it's because where there's unity, there's no jealousy. So it's just a funny, interesting little story. Jacob, of course, has a dream of a ladder with angels going up and down and God at the top of the ladder. One could talk about what that ladder looks like. It could just be a regular ladder. It could be like the ziggurat pyramids where the priests would go up and down. I always personally like to think of the ladder as the double helix strand of DNA, that ladder inside of us upon which all of our genetic information and life comes from. So another word about that, spirals, a spiral ladder. Spirals are actually considered to be a much more spiritual shape than anything else. The circle is just us going round and round, repeating ourselves endlessly, whereas a spiral, we might return to the same lessons, but each time we return, we're just a little bit higher. So Jacob has this dream. That's an interesting thing to talk about with the kids also, is dreams themselves. What are dreams? The rabbis say that a dream uninterpreted is a letter unread or unopened. So if you were to get a letter from God or from your future self or a deep message and you were to never open that letter, that's what a dream is if we don't spend the time thinking about our dream, interpreting our dream. I'm sure they'd have what kind of dreams do they have? Do they have repetitive dreams? How do we interpret dreams? What do they say about us? Sometimes the Torah is understood itself as the dream, the synchronized dream of the Jewish people. And just like in a dream where there are things that are absurd, there are things that don't make sense, there's no sense of time, but we're supposed to interpret dreams as if every part of the dream is a manifestation of a part of us. So if you're being chased by someone towards a cliff, you are the one being chased, but you're also the chaser, and you're also the cliff. And similarly, we look at Torah that way. We think, Jacob is a part of us, Isaac, Abraham, God, the stone that's the pillow. Every aspect of Torah has something to tell us about us. It's our dream, our synchronized dream. So when Jacob wakes from this dream, he says, God was in this place and I did not know it. That's a powerful thing to say, that idea that God can be found anywhere. Jacob isn't really anywhere. He left one place, he hasn't yet arrived at the other, and in that in-between space is where he discovers God is here. Similar to the mezuzah. The mezuzah isn't where you come from, it isn't where you're going, it's that in-between liminal space, and it's in that space that we give a kiss and we acknowledge God on our journey. What does it mean that we discover God or we discover ourselves on the way as opposed to getting there? Think about who you are at base camp, who you are when you reach the summit, but who you are on the journey, that's where the revelations sometimes take place. We have the story of the wedding of Jacob. He wants to marry Rachel, but he's tricked and he ends up marrying Leah. How does that happen? Leah is perhaps wearing a veil that is really thick and he doesn't check under the veil. And beautifully, Rachel doesn't humiliate her sister, she allows her sister to have the wedding night. But you might have a conversation about veils and the purpose of veils and how we all wear veils. Some say that the veil at the wedding is really to make a promise that we're going to love each other, even though there are going to be times when your face is covered up and I don't recognize you. Last week we talked a little bit about rivalries. In this Torah portion, we have more rivalry. We have, instead of brothers rivalry, we have sister rivalry. If you go on to the gems of Torah, you have, this idea of, there's an interesting little part here about dust, where God says your seed will be as the dust of the earth. And why are the people compared to dust of all things? The Kabbalists, the Jewish mystics, say that that which is the lowest comes from the highest. So actually we can learn more about the heavens by studying the dust under our feet. So that's one Kabbalistic teaching. And there's a teaching here why we are compared to dust. The Midah is all about not embarrassing each other, as Leah and Rachel. There's a very famous commandment that one who publicly shames a neighbor is as if one has shed blood, because the blood from our face, when we make someone turn pale, it's as if we've literally shed the blood out of their face. And so why is embarrassing someone so bad and so hurtful? And have we ever been embarrassed? And what do we do to help make amends for that? Very famous story included here of Bar Kamsa. The rabbis say this is the reason why the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed, was because of a case of deep humiliation and embarrassment. You could read this story and ask the kids, who is guilty? Is it the host? Is it the messenger? Is it the guests at the party? Is it the enemy himself? The word enemy is a really tough word. It's a great, great story. And then finally, the mitzvahs of treating your workers fairly, not stealing. One of my favorite commandments is here that you should not keep for yourself the wages of a laborer until morning. So if the gardener shows up and you're in your bathrobe and he's asking for his check, you can't say, oh, come back tomorrow. Now's not a good time. You're supposed to pay a person for the work that they do on time. So there's a lot of wonderful things in this Torah portion. And again, thank you so much for teaching our kids. They're so lucky.